Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its meeting held on January 7, 2014. The meeting setting forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona City Book Times, the Star Ledger, the Herald News, the Township of Verona, and the Verona Education Association. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted in each of Verona's 6 schools, the board office, and town hall. This posting was also sent to the above newspapers, all SCA presidents, and SCA liaisons. The Verona Board of Education operates under consent agenda format. Any board member has a right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public present. Mr. Sparta?
Here.
Mr. Beck?
Here.
Mr. Galina?
Here.
Mr. Munis?
Here.
Mr. Quattrucci?
Here. Okay, welcome to our first meeting of April. We have a presentation tonight. We're going to wrap up. Mr. Friesen is here tonight. But before we get into that, is there any comment on any agenda item? No? Okay, let's go to our winter wrap.
Good evening. This winter season, athletic participation increased slightly from last year, including 122 boys and 79 girls, with a total of 201 participants. And it was also a very successful winter season, accumulating 64 conference, county, and state honors. On February 2nd, Natalie Works was chosen to represent Verona High School at the National Women and Sports Day luncheon at Seton Hall University. And Luke Weiss was honored at Mayfair Farms for the National Football Foundation Scholar Athlete Award on March 12th. The girls and boys indoor track team placed 25 times in meets this season, with Amanda Flores and Christine Calandra placing in the All Group 1 meet, and Chris Sweeney and Chris Yates setting the school records for indoor track in the 400 and 200 meter races respectively. Ice hockey won their Winter Classic 3-0 at Tenafly versus Tenafly at the Englewood Field Club in sub-20 degree weather, and turned in a final record of 17-6-3. Senior Dylan Candia received many accolades. He was in the top 10 in scoring with 68 points, that's 51 goals and 17 assists. He was second in goals in the state. He received the MVP for the Essex Division, first team all public schools, second team all state. The Star Ledger Essex County Hockey Player of the Year and the New Jersey Devils Player of the Month. Dylan, will you please come forward? Also with ice hockey, first-year head coach Ken Lillian turned the team around, with the team recording only 3 wins in the previous year into a 17-6-3 record, and thus received Essex County Ice Hockey Coach of the Year. Okay? Boys basketball won the holiday tournament for the 3rd consecutive year, and that's a first in the history of the tournament that any team has won in 3 straight years. They also finished second in the conference and received the 2nd seed in the state tournament. Seniors Alex Caslander and Matt Braschi received first team all SEC Colonial Division honors, and Alex reached a milestone. He is the 17th Verona High School basketball player and the 11th male to score 1,000 points. Alex, can you please come? We already have one, but we're going to put this in the trophy case. Okay? Congratulations. Something else, Alex. Wrestling had another successful season, with many fine young men competing in the postseason with the team finishing in the top 10 in Essex County. Paul Scully, Joe Valentine, and Mark Riggio all received first team all conference honors, and Mark received third team all Essex County. Paul reached a milestone as the fourth wrestler in Verona High School history to receive or achieve 1,000 wins. Paul? I'm sorry, 100. Okay, and lastly, the girls' basketball team compiled a record of 19-8 overall and 12-2 in the conference. They won the conference championship, and that is the first conference championship girls' basketball teams won since 2010. And they finished in the top 10 in Group 1, and also reached the state section finals for the first time in school history. Brielle Cummings and Julie Rosenberg received honors for first team all-conference independent division, and we also want to congratulate first-year head coach Jessica Del Vecchio on guiding the team into new territory and having a great season. Right here. When I call your name, please come forward. Brielle Cummings. Julie Rosenberg. Remy Sullivan. Julianne Sullivan. Leah Ferrari. Sarah O'Neill. And Caroline Kiernan. Okay, once again, we want to congratulate all the winter teams and thank everyone for their part in making this another great winter season. Coming up on Tuesday, April 29th, Verona will play baseball versus Cedar Grove at the Yogi Berra Stadium located at Montclair State University. Game time is 7 p.m. And lastly, I wish to thank Paul and Gary Grosso, along with the school's district and town's maintenance and custodial crew for preparing grounds for the spring season. Thank you.
Okay, we have three committee reports to do tonight: athletics, buildings and grounds, and finance. Let's do athletics first.
I think Jim's going to take this one.
Couple things, we met earlier in the week. One of the items we talked about was the cardiac screening. Still working through that. As you know, the state had requested or made a requirement to readdress how to do cardiac screening. There's actually a new form that they're putting together. We talked to Gary, and there's a possible approval by the county doctor, so they're meeting together to talk about that. I'm trying to lock down exactly what cardiac screening for student athletes will require and what requirements we need to move forward. So, regarding the AEDs, this is an ongoing scenario where we keep waiting for quotes. We're talking Lifesaver, Cintas, talking about purchasing and leasing, and you got an update.
Just got an update, actually. Yeah, just a moment before we walked in. Cintas came in as unable to match the bid from Lifesaver, so we're going to go ahead with Lifesaver.
You heard it here first. Lifesavers is coming in.
Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for putting me on the spot. So, okay, everybody's got that news now. The winter sports highlights, of course, guys did a great job talking about all the wonderful sports and activities that our great students do and continue to do. And, hopefully we'll continue that trend and continue to improve upon things, but especially like hockey, going from where we were to where we are. Those are amazing things. One of the things we talked about was the track. We had issues periodically where people love that track. People love to use HPW track. Problem is when there's students on the track, they sometimes can cause a problem. So we had requested to put up a sign basically saying the track's closed to the public during school activities or school hours. And for us, we feel that's maybe not during school activities, if there's children on the actual track, that we need to make sure that the public is not in the way of things. The other thing was we had talked about a state convention in which Gary attended. Gary was one of the co-presidents of the conference, and it happened on March 27th and 28th, and he was up there speaking about interviewing, evaluating, and supporting his coaches. So that is a critical component of what Gary does for the athletics in this town. One other thing I want to talk about too is the field committees. We actually had a group of coaches meet with Gary to talk about some of the items on the referendum, some of the items on the fields, working with the coaches to talk about layouts and different ways we can work on the fields to make sure that we have it set up the way it would be beneficial for the coaches for all sports. And then we also had something maybe Steve Fort's going to talk about in his presentation, but we did have a DOE representatives and residents and the superintendent meet together and talk about the fields and talk about different ways that we can work together to make sure the field can move forward in the right direction. And just to add one other thing about athletics, my wife went to UConn, so we're happy UConn won yesterday, and we're hoping for the UConn win tonight. So. And that's it for me.
Buildings and grounds. So item number one is an update on the energy savings improvement project, which is a state mandated or supported project where an energy company can come into a school district, do an audit, identify some energy savings capital improvements, and then have the annual savings fund the capital expense and the amortization of that capital expense. So after quite a rigorous evaluation process where several firms came in to walk through the district, submit their proposals, and Mr. McDevitt evaluated all the proposals and then made a recommendation to the committee, which is making a recommendation to the full board under addendum resolution number 1 to select Honeywell as our energy service company to manage the ESIP, the improvement project process. So we're not, the next step for them would be to come in and do a very detailed engineering and energy audit, from which will come their engineering recommendations, their design recommendations. So that's addendum resolution number 1. An update on the Forest Avenue school roof replacement. So the final closeout punch list is completed. The roof was repaired for $37,000. We received, in the committee, we received an update on the pest management. And I think we received a letter from the Montclair Health Department saying that if we keep doing what we're doing, our procedures are in line with managing any pest problem that we have in the high school.
That's correct. And they made recommendations that we continue what we did last year, so we're going to do that as part of the program.
And I think during the break, we're going to, our custodians are going to go through the lockers and do cleaning or sanitation.
The students are empty their lockers, and then over the break, the custodians will clean out the lockers with the vacuum, and then there'll be some other traps and things like that put in the building on vacation.
Okay. Item number 4 on a milestone for the referendum project under addendum resolution number 2. The committee is recommending for the full board to approve French and Perillo as our field engineering consultants. And their scope of work will be the entire project on the lower field, involving any of the civil engineering work, as well as the installation of a turf, an artificial turf field. And they'll also, the other scope of work will be to manage any improvements to the upper field. And so we received their proposal. It was within our expected budget is on the higher end of the range that we were expecting, but it's still within what our expectations were. So we're recommending as a committee that the board approve French and Pillow under addendum resolution number 2. The last item is the status on repairs to the HDW track. So where we stand there is we received an estimate from a company that has conducted a very similar scope of work, what we believe our track requires. They did a very similar project, and they sent us the invoice for that project, and as a guide for us to create a budget, which is, we are anticipating a total cost of about $90,000 for the track refurbishment and repair, and about $40,000, $50,000 or so to address the drainage that's coming off the hill at HBW falling onto the track. So that total budget of $135,000 is going to be funded. And then there was a subsequent finance committee meeting, so we're expecting to either fund it in next year's budget. If we have money in this year's budget, we'll get it taken care of, and then we expect that half of that cost will be defrayed by the contribution from our partner in the track, Montreal Timber Academy. So we hope to get it done this summer. Expect to get it done this summer. That's it.
Okay. Finance committee?
Okay, the finance committee did meet, and I just want to follow up one point. I'll just emphasize one point and then a follow-up point is that we have included the track repair cost in next year's budget, but we feel that perhaps by the end of this year there may be enough money left in current year's budget that we'll be able to fund it in this year's budget. If that does happen, then the money that we've set aside for the track next year can be used for other repairs and some priority that Mr. McFedder would like to see. The only follow-up that I can give on, there was a discussion about the town's participation in the renovation and rehabilitation of the track, and at this point in time, we have not gotten any response from them in terms of anything that they can provide. So right now, the cost of that will be borne by the district and MKA, shared on 50-50 basis with MKA. There is a question about the drainage problem and whether or not MKA is going to share in that or not. That may be something that we may have to get 100% ourselves on that. That's to be discussed with MKA, and we'll report back beyond that. So worst case scenario, that portion we have to pay for ourselves, but the servicing we have to pay for. Beyond that, we pretty much spent the most of the time discussing next year's budget. And there is some good news to report on that scene, is that after we completed all of the calculations that were necessary because of the contract renewals with the VBA and what it meant moving people up on the new guide and recalculating their health benefits contribution, we underestimated what that contribution was. So because we underestimated it, it became a favorable item to us. And because it was almost double what we had anticipated, maybe not exactly double, but certainly maybe even 70-75% more, we were able to free up some money in the budget, include some things in the budget that we didn't discuss at the last board meeting, and which is an item such as the track, There are some new employees. There are 3 new employees, full-time employees, and increasing 2 others. I think there's actually just 40 employees, 3 of them full-time, 1 of them part-time, and increasing 2 current teachers, 1 current teacher, and then hiring a part-time teacher in music. So there's a number of things that are included in the budget, including the track. But because of the benefit of the increase in health benefits subsidy from the teachers, we actually now have an increase in the budget with all obligations of 2.48%, which is less than what we discussed and what we approved in the preliminary budget. The preliminary budget had a tax increase of 2.78%, and that has now been reduced to 2.48%, and includes everything pretty much on our wish list. And so the recommendation from the Finance Committee at this point is to move ahead with the final budget with an increase of 2.48% in terms of tax rate.
And that includes 80,000 for the track.
That's correct. That's correct.
And the additional, so the only change to what we talked about in this list then is this behaviorist from 70% to 100% plus the track. Right, and so that ends up to the other change on the DG of 32 minus strategic plan. So there's a net of about 150K increased spending, right? But then a decrease.
So that's 1.2.
Well, 122 is the 80 for the track,
Okay.
but then there's the other adjustment,
Oh,
is
okay.
32K for the DG,
Right, okay.
right? And then 20K for the strategic plan that came out, so that's a net of 12, right?
Right.
So it's 152, right?
Okay.
So the 152 is an increase in spending, and then there's an offsetting effect of the healthcare contribution that reduces the net from 278 to 248.
Right.
That-
Yes, correct.
that looks right.
That's correct.
So the only thing I would say, just with respect to the track, we exchanged some email on this the other day. We were in a meeting the other night where Mr. Miller talked about some curriculum work that he expected to get done this year that he's been frozen from spending money on this year. To the extent that we have money, I think we should, and we're budgeting for the track in the coming year budget, we ought to just make sure that we're not fixing the track and leaving curriculum frozen. If he told us he had curriculum revisions to work on, we couldn't do it because of budget freeze. So we just, if there is money to need, because that's usually about $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 tops. I don't think we would want to pass $5 million in this stipend.
We're getting pretty close to being able to open that up if the outlook looks better.
But the spend on the curriculum writing is next year, because they do it in summer. They get paid in
He
July,
did
August.
want to do one now.
One?
When we were going through the rough winter, we didn't say you couldn't do it, we just said, let's put it on hold and see how the year's coming out. So we're getting pretty close to it.
We have a meeting set up for the week of the 21st, after meeting on the 23rd, to discuss this year's budget. And we would have a good feel as to where we stand on that. So I would suggest that we hold off on that until we have that meeting, perhaps we can fund it from this year. And if not, perhaps a $6,000 increase of that, not to change the budget at all, and want to put that in. But I think we probably might be
Well,
able to.
we are budgeted for curriculum writing next year.
We are,
Yeah.
okay, so
It's
there's
just
a
that in the past, we've always done it in the summertime. That's why,
All right. So, we will discuss it in the finance committee, and we may be able to do it this year.
Right, if the 21st comes out that we feel good, then we're gonna
the
loosen
23rd.
it up, the 23rd.
23rd.
Then we'll go forward. We just needed to have some time to
Well, when
catch up.
would we know whether we can fix the track this year?
That would be later in the year.
Yeah, that probably won't be till like May or so, somewhere maybe the middle of May. I mean, we're talking about, something more substantial, we're talking about $80,000 there, so.
Plus, that's not budgeted for in this year's budget.
So,
The curriculum thing was budgeted for. We just froze it for a short time
Oh,
because
okay.
we had to catch up.
Right, so I got an unbudgeted item that I budgeted for next year, and I've got a budgeted item on our curriculum that I froze. And the guy was saying, I wanted to spend that money, and I
Right.
can't.
Well, I
I'm
think,
saying,
I
if
think
we have the money, that should go.
we can answer the question.
Definitely would do that.
We can answer the curriculum question by the 23rd.
Right.
And I can't see any reason why we wouldn't.
But I don't think if it's only, you said it's only for 1
But it was a few $1,000s. We put a freeze on all that kind of stuff just for a short term. It's probably been about 2 months. And we're planning on the 21st having a more,
So you should get a sense of that, because we usually approve that, that's spending we usually approve by a number of hours, so
right,
it's up to like $35 an hour. It's not a lot.
right.
In our finance committee meeting, we talked about having this be a possibility that we should go to 8, that we might not need, so that's another 7%.
You know what, we're gonna keep that placeholder there because that amount is like, it's 2 aides.
Okay.
And I'm gonna talk to her again about what she thinks her needs are because we may need that for those 2 weeks. So just talk to Steve.
Okay, got it.
One other thing, had you,
Sorry, Ken, regardless of where the money's budgeted for the track, we're gonna do the track this summer.
Yeah.
is there a bid spec being put together for that?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
gonna go out for,
Yeah, okay.
So I guess, so basically the plan is, if we know in June that we have extra money this year, we go and do it in June.
Well, we're gonna go out to bid. We're going
Right.
out to bid probably in May, get bids back, and we're gonna pay for it. It's just a question of where we're gonna pay for it. We're gonna pay out of this year's budget, we're paying out of next year's budget. That's the only thing that's up in the air right now.
And it's in the budget for next year, so that's
So
great.
it's, I mean, even, if we don't have it this year, we go back to pay for it out of next year's budget. But the track, hopefully, assuming everything goes well, that project will be undertaken this summer and should be finished by fall and ready to go for the spring.
And then you're also increasing that operating budget that we've been speaking about. We put 100, now there's another 80 in there. This should be the track, we have 180 for next year. The goal was to try to hit 500,000 in the next 4 years, so we're on track for that.
Well, that's, we're increasing it.
Yeah, increasing it by 500,000.
Well, we're increasing it by 180 total.
Right, yeah, which is a good thing to start by doing that.
The only other thing that we did discuss, and we did discuss it to some extent in the buildings and grounds as well, the same type of discussion is extra help for our current administrators. Mr. McDevitt and Mr. Nardino in terms of work that has to be done in relation to the referendum. And we've discussed a few different things. I don't know that we have anything we're ready to report. We've talked about hiring some people, we've talked about using people who are currently on staff, and I think both of those need further discussion. I think we're inclined to agree that we need to do something, we just don't know who those people are at this point in time. And from Mr. McDevitt's point, he had a suggestion. I'm not sure it's a workable one at this point. Mr. Nardino has a suggestion, and so we'll report back on that, but I think both of them are going to need some help. We're not going to have a project manager per se. With the big referendum that we passed in 2005, or the 2005, we went out and hired a professional project manager. The type of project, and normally that's what is done when there's heavy construction, and there was certainly heavy construction then. We had 4 additions on 6 buildings. Here, the only real construction work is out on the field, obviously, and also with the addition to the music room, which is much less in terms of magnitude. And so we're not going to hire a formal project manager, but maybe hire a clerk of the works or someone else with construction experience to help Mr. McDevitt, and someone with some administrative experience, skills, bookkeeping skills per se, and helping with applications and reimbursement forms that have to be filed for our state line grant reimbursement. And that's about it. Our budget meeting, we have a public hearing on the budget scheduled for April 29th, and that's when we will approve, actually by resolution, pass the final budget for 2014-2015. And that's the final report.
Just have a question on the budget. So if we go with the 248, the scenario, the third column from the right here, right? That 248 means we're using 0.48 of our bank cap,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But on top of this, the $528,000 in bank cap, is that adjusted for that? So the 0.48 is about,
That's the beginning total of 528.
so the 528 is a total of our current bank,
Right,
and we're using 0.48 about it, which is about $140,000.
right.
So that goes down, so now we'll have, going into next year, 390, some 390,000. So if you take that 390, this is the point I was trying to make 2 meetings ago. If you take that 390 of bank cap, and we already added this year 180 into the B and G, inclusive of the track, which is going to be recurring, right? That's at, you're at 570. Right, so the money that we need to fix up the maintenance, repair operating budget is sitting right in that cap. Yep. Right?
So we gotta be careful we don't let it expire.
We don't let it expire, we don't spend it on other things.
Right.
Right? You can't say I'm gonna spend it on something else and then say I don't have the money to go to the maintenance. But the money's sitting there, right, so you just have to spend it. You live on your money, yeah.
No, it won't say it.
Oh, we won't rate it? It's like 5 votes? There's nobody else. All right, we have one discussion item, on 2 discussion items on the, so that, I'm not sure what the meeting schedule was, June 24th?
So we have, normally, we have the meeting the week before, I put it on there, just so we could not forget to talk about it.
What's the,
Right now, it's scheduled for June 24th, and normally we have it the week before, so we were, seeing if everybody would want to do it on June 17th. It's a board meeting, Tuesday the 24th, right?
is that the Tuesday after school finishes?
That's the Tuesday, yes,
Is that the Tuesday right before school finishes? or
right
Tuesday
after, right after.
So we have that meeting at.
On the 17th, right, yeah.
So the question is, can we move to the week before?
Right.
Are we okay with that? Tuesday, Tuesday the 17th. That's good with everybody?
When is graduation?
20th. June 20th is a Friday.
And, budget item?
We kind of did it, if there's any more you want to talk about, but it was pretty much discovered, it's discussed in finance.
Anything else on budget then? Superintendent?
There are 2 job descriptions in your package for approval tonight. The first one is where we would pretty much morph a job that we have currently, where we have a person retiring in the attendance office at VHS. And rather than just replacing it with the same job, we came up with this thing that would be a little bit more 21st century, where the person would be the central registrar and deal with attendance for the building and for the district, as well as NJ Smart. So that's one. The second one is the desktop support, which is the new tech position that we put in the budget this year. And Ms. Costanza wrote a job description for that. It fits a specific need. That's in your packet. Here's I think a pretty interesting and a nice accolade for the school, for the district. The Washington Post has this. They do one of these surveys and they put out together a list of the most challenging high schools in the United States and the Northeast. So we've made a steady decline, which is an incline, going from a higher number to a lower number, meaning that we're ranked higher. So in 2011, in the United States, we were ranked the 1,704th most challenging high school in the United States. Now that does include all private schools, magnet schools, and charter schools. So it's in 2011, 1,704th in the country. And in 2014, we came in at 812th. One of the big thing that they do here is it's based on your AP scores. So AP or IB tests, they consider these your college level courses, and they take your number of tests and they divide it by your graduating class. That's pretty much how they rank this. So in the Northeast, in 2011, we were 297th in the Northeast. And now, this year, in 2014, we're 114. So there's-
What year did they must, since they're doing it now, they must use 2012, 13?
Yeah, they use the, yeah,
Last full year?
correct.
So we should move, if they did it again, we would move.
Yeah, we move substantially. Sure. And we're also adding another class too for next year, so hopefully we'll even have more tests as well. So this is, I think these are great statistics. Now, it's based solely on one thing, and it's definitely something that we focused on over the years. So it's nice to see that, here's a steady improvement in this particular survey over the last few years.
Well, it's also consistent with New Jersey Monthly, the Newsweek.
Well, in this particular one, they really focused only on AP scores, yeah, so it really shows that it's a great correlation between how many tests we've given and our ranking. We've given more tests as we went along. They used another stat, which was how many kids passed it to, but that wasn't involved in how you ranked it, it was just a stat that they gave. It was really ranked just on that one statistic. And we did have that field usage meeting on April 1st. We had about 40 neighbors there, and I only expected about 12. We had 12 that RSVP'd, so we had 40. And what we decided from that meeting with the group of people that were there is to pull out a small group and then have some recommendations to the board for a policy. That I'll do that meeting with them on April 29th. We have a small group of 5 people coming that day. That was my report.
Any questions? Okay, let's do the resolutions.
Resolved that the board approve resolutions number 1 through number 9 and addendum resolutions number 1 and number 2.
Moved by Mr. Lino, seconded by Mrs. Waddell. Any questions? I just have, so I know what number 7 is the long form document on the issuance of bonds, right? The green light to bond. I just want to make sure I'm clear on what 8 and 9 specifically are doing. Because they're both related to these, right?
No, 8 and 9 are related to the grant agreement that we received. We've only received one grant
So
agreement.
this is the grant agreement, this is the rod part for, okay.
So you're going to see these 2 resolutions repeated 7 times?
For each piece of the rod?
Right. So it's standard language. The board has to approve it this way because it's part of that grant agreement and they want specific things done. And if you don't do it the right way, then they hold up the money.
Right. Okay, so resolution 1 is the addendum. That's for the, okay. And then resolution 2, the addendum again, is appointing French and Furlow, approving the contract pending review for adjusted field, parking lot, and tennis court. What about the other parts of the project?
Well, we're still waiting. We've been working with the architects to make sure everything that's supposed to be included is included. So we weren't comfortable with it today. So we're coming back and we'll have it ready for the 29th.
So there's a separate contract for the other elements?
Correct. Because there's actually 3 groups we're working with. We have French and Perlo, we have Mylan, and then we have our technology people. Those are the 3 different groups.
Okay, so we have two more.
We have 2 more.
Okay. All right, let's call the vote.
Mr. Sparnow?
Aye.
Mr. Day? Mr. Bellino?
Yeah.
Mr. Yunus?
Aye.
Mr. Portrucci?
Okay, we'll move to public comment or questions.
Hello, I'm Melissa Smith. I'm one of the teachers from the middle school. And I actually just wanted to share some positive news with all of you. Last year, I had the opportunity to work with Mr. Forte during the Verona Leadership Academy, and we actually worked on the advertising policy. I reached out to a contact of mine who was actually my hairstylist, and he offered to run a cut-a-thon and donate all the proceeds to our district. So what we did was we had the cut-a-thon recently. We ended up raising $800, and all of that money went to the Verona lacrosse program, the town, and both the high school as well. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Louis. That was a great program, and love to see more of that. Thank you.
Thank you for the positive news. That's a perk, that's it.
Sounds like a great program, I'm sorry I missed that. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Dan DePalma, 10 Dot Terrace. Been a resident for about 23 plus years, and my son and family have thoroughly enjoyed being residents here and enjoying the fullness of being a member of the Verona community. I've been selected to be a part of the field committee, and I just wanted to touch on some thoughts. Some things that have been brought to my attention, and I believe the gentleman, Rudy Frizzi, who's a longtime resident and a friend of the township, had brought to bear. He's also been selected for the field committee, and he sent an email out, and I believe it was sent to everybody here on the committee. But he had some thoughts about the program that the township is about to embark on for the Lower Field project. And I'm not going to expand on all of his thoughts because I think he's better suited to do that, especially since in his email he has a variety of calculations and assumptions that are based on his particular expertise, which is civil engineering. But one of the things that I thought could be a great benefit to the township is that he talks about the process by which he feels the upper field can be saved. Saved in such a way that there's a considerable savings, approximately $1 to $1.3 million. The township can actually take that money and do other things with it for the sports program and so forth. Some of the things that he references are the lack of intrusion on the surrounding communities, whether it be referenced to light, the glow from the lights, the noise pollution from additional activities, and the parking and congestion concerns. I had spoken with Mr. Galino and Mr. Parisian briefly after the meeting, and I said, I thought it was imperative that these ideas be further explored. More importantly, I felt that the township would better benefit from the use of 3 possible fields instead of 2 fields, because currently the proposal is to abandon the upper field because of remediation concerns and so forth. And I know there's a lot more involved with that process, and I'm sure that you'll find that out as you go along. But the fact of the matter is, right now the lower field has a proposal for 2 fields. It's a multi-purpose field, and it looks like things are really being compacted into that very small area. And I don't think you're going to be able to get the use out of it that you would enjoy, and I think that you'll be able to get the total benefit that you'd want out of it for the cost being spent. So with that said, when I read this email, and he very specifically talked about some processes by which that field could be saved, I thought it would be a great benefit to be able to explore 3 fields instead of just abandoning the upper field and then moving forward with the lower field projects. But you could move your lights, you could remediate the upper field, keep it as a football field. Okay, the band can certainly make use of it. The benefit of being right adjacent to the school, adjacent to the locker rooms for the football team, adjacent to the band room, certainly benefit for the kids, and I think it's beneficial for the community as a whole. So I just hope that we will take the opportunity to explore this, because I think there is a great opportunity for the township and to look at this in totality, whereas everybody can get better use out of the resources that you guys have at hand. And I thank you for your time.
I'll address Mr. Palmer. I think you bring up so I saw Mr. Frizzy's suggestions, which were certainly born out of expertise coming from
Yes.
his background. And I read a report from the committee that you were sat in on, the field committee.
Mhm.
You were part of that, right? So my takeaways, I'll just summarize where we are on the overall project is the sense that I got from the committee work was that we do expect to get the amount of utility from the lower field that we expect when we initially set out on the project, to get the use out of that lower field that we expect. So the designs that are being discussed, there weren't any surprises that came out of the committee you were in.
Right.
And so and then we dovetailed the further discussion on the upper field. So kind of where I think we're gravitating to, I think, and Steve was part of a project meeting today, was that we're moving forward with the design on the lower field. And we expect that we have budgeted adequately for that lower field to do the work. And if there's any extra money that we can save, that if we can recapture that unusable, what's currently assumed is unusable on the upper field, by all means, we'd love to recapture that. So our first priority is the lower field, and then if we have the luxury of fixing the upper field, by all means, we expect to do that as well.
Well, one of the great concerns here is that, and I know Mr. Forte can attest to this, is that there's been a lot of friction in the surrounding neighborhoods in reference to the fields themselves, the usage, the frequency of use, and the fact that they're going to be lit, and it's pretty much transplanted in a lot of people's backyards. So when I read this, I looked at it as an opportunity for the township and the Board of Education to revisit this project and say, you know what, not only can I have a better process, okay, but I can also take into consideration the concerns of the surrounding families that have been living in the neighborhood for many years, and maybe some of them are relatively new, but more to the point, when you transplant a project like this in the middle of the neighborhood, it's going to have a lot of ramifications, and some of them are negative ramifications. So, our concerns were somewhat alleviated when we looked at this process and we said, you know what, we could have the best of both worlds. I mean, because if you fix the upper field and you like the upper field, one of the big concerns that the surrounding areas have is that the lighting fixtures could be on poles approximately 110 feet high. So of course, you're trying to light a field that's much more expanded. It's more than double the width of a football field. I believe it's a soccer lacrosse type of combination with a football field on the other side. And then of course you have an overlay of two baseball diamonds in the opposite corner. So to say that you're trying to put a lot into this one project would be minimalizing it at the worst. But the fact of the matter is, if you move that lighting up to the upper field, the parking lot is adjacent to the field. So the traffic will probably be mostly contained in the upper lot to some respect. I know there are larger events, you have Thanksgiving, sometimes there's playoff games and so forth, and of course, the surrounding area accommodates that. We welcome it. It's all part of our community. We've been ingrained with it for many years. But the light poles at the upper field will be a lot less, and they'll be a lot lower. In addition to that, you have a natural border on both sides of that field. There's a tree line on the slope. There's a tree line on the south side of the field, and then you have the school blocking the side that fronts Fairview Avenue. And the only other open side is the parking lot. So it's much less obtrusive to the area. And so what we're saying is that I think there are a lot of concerns here that I think the board needs to be sensitive to. Unfortunately, we got involved in this whole process a little bit late in the game, and there's nobody to blame but ourselves, but the idea being is that, the Centennial Field project is all the way up on the mountaintop here. It's not transplanted in somebody's backyard. The light glare and glow coming from those lights isn't really affecting anybody in a neighborhood. Whereas, this is transplanted right here in our neighborhoods. And of course, there's other traffic considerations from the elementary school and so forth. We've always had issues with traffic on Sampson, which is one of the reasons they turned it into a one-way street years ago. But when it was a two-way street, it was like a racing strip. So, the outlying streets, Franklin, you have Grove, you have Sampson, you have Dodd Terrace, they all have these concerns about possibility of the overuse of the field. We also have concerns about the fact that, it's a high school field, and I think the Board of Education likes to refer to it as a high school field with the affiliated sports and related sports that go along with this school. But I think that project down there is going to turn into a field that's going to be used by everybody and possibly anyone. So again, the frequency of use is a great concern to us, and quite honestly, my philosophy is if you build it with lights, they will come. So, what's going to govern the use of that field? We don't know. We've talked extensively with Mr. Forte on this, and unfortunately, there's no narrative here. We would have felt more comfortable as a community, if the Board of Education had, offered us the opportunity to get together in advance and say, hey, guess what? We're going to be going through this process. We're going to be transplanting this huge project in your backyard. It's going to have lights. Unfortunately, the Board of Education didn't know how many lights it was going to have. I've been to meetings where it was going to have, 6 light poles, 110 feet high. Then there were going to be 12 light poles, 6 of them provided by the township, but nobody knows how they got there. And then the last meeting I attended, there's going to be 8 light poles. So, don't mind me if I say, we're scared. And we have a right to be scared because, the Board of Education hasn't outlined any process for us to consume, digest, okay, and make informed decisions about this particular project. So again, and I don't want to overstate it, but when Mr. Frizzy comes up with, some thoughts, and I spoke to Mr. Frizzy about it, and he told me, he goes, look, he said, Dan, he said, if you want to discuss things that you guys discussed, amongst yourselves, he says, that's fine. He said, but I have an issue with you getting into particularities and so forth, and excuse me, I understand that quite well because, in his line of business, there's a lot of formulas involved in calculations. I'm certainly not going to get into any of that. But the fact of the matter is that, you're going to put this obtuse thing in the middle of this very sedate, okay, sleeping neighborhood at night, with the possibility of making it a sleeping giant. And if you do remediate the upper field, and you do put the sports back up there, I think that's going to alleviate some of that problem. It's going to alleviate some of the fears from the people in the neighborhood, myself included. I think you have the potential of keeping the majority of the traffic up here because I know there's an issue with parking. We don't know where the additional parking is going to come from. We have parking spots that line, pretty much the entire length of Sampson. You guys are going to add an additional 30 parking spaces next to the tennis court up here, but, is that going to be enough? Probably not, and I'm going to tell you how I know that, because on my block, okay, people park all the time. They park on Franklin, and they park on Grove. And it's not just for a particular sport or a Thanksgiving game and so forth, and we deal with it, and sometimes the police come along and they post no parking signs on one side, and that's all good and well, but I think what you really need to do is you need to examine the surrounding area and be concerned with how the impact is going to affect the neighborhood. And I know the township has done no impact study. There's been no feasibility study discussed. And I know that sometimes you guys like to shoot first and ask questions later, but unfortunately we don't have that luxury. We feel, and I speak for a very large concerned group of people in the surrounding area, that this is definitely and dramatically going to affect the quality of our lives if done improperly. And there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it, and unfortunately, we feel that this has not been the right way to go about this process.
I think we're attempting to ameliorate your fear with facts as much as we can. So we encourage the meetings that Steve had on April 1st, more dialogue, more engagement, and because there are, I think the more facts you have about the project,
Well, yeah, but we haven't been presented with any facts. Matter of fact, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys don't even have like a formal mocked-up plan for exactly how this whole thing's going to lay out. So there isn't anything
No,
for the
no,
resident.
that's not true. That's not true. I mean, I understand your concern, and I appreciate the comment that you
Yeah,
made.
thank you.
I totally do. But I have to object to the comment about shooting first and asking questions later. I don't believe this board's ever done that.
No, but that's the way we
We've been
feel.
discussing this project for a year,
Yes.
all right? And we have mock-up plans that Mr. Forte gave us a year ago.
Constantly
You don't do
change.
You don't do final plans
No.
until you pass a referendum.
No, I'm
Nobody
not,
does that.
that's not what
Nobody
I
goes
said.
out and spends $200,000, $300,000 on plans unless you know you have the money. Now, we passed this referendum on March the 11th. It's now April the 8th.
Mhm.
And the architects and the engineers are now providing us with contracts so that they can go into their final plans, which is the way everybody does a project, all right? And that's the way it works. You know, you
Well, I
find
get
out
that.
you have the money for it,
I get it.
you get a conceptual plan, which we had long in advance. You go out and then you find out where you get the money from, and then you move on to the final drawing, which is where we're at, going into final
Right.
drawing. So we have these things here for you. Now, having said that, we do appreciate your comments are. We do appreciate the concerns that you have, and the fact that you use the word fear is a strong word. And
It is a very strong word.
all right. We've talked to you, and we've mentioned to you that we're going to try and develop a board policy which will outline the use of the field. Now, the chance of that being 100% satisfactory to you is fairly remote. But it should alleviate some of the fears that you have in terms of usage. All comers, I think, is something that is not in the plans and not in the thought.
I think
So,
that we
You
can
know,
agree
we're
that there
doing
are,
that
you know,
with your input, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact. Mr. Forte is meeting with you at the end of the month to try and define greater what your concerns and your fears are, which we'll do.
well, let me say this, you know, going back to what you're saying about a plan, you know, the conceptual plan that the Board of Education provided was sparse, to say the least. I mean, there's a lot of information left off the
We
plan.
have engineering plans that are this thick.
Okay, but, you know, we haven't seen anything that emulates what it is you guys want to do up there.
Have you come
Joe.
to ask to see?
May I interrupt for 1 second? Mr. Palmer, thank you for coming out. I do want to share two thoughts. One is that your concerns are obviously very important to us, and I think that's why we are all listening here and trying not to interrupt, even though I think those who listen to this tape and those who are sitting here do disagree with some of the statements that have been said, but we still want to hear 100% of them. And two, that if you really fully want to be heard in all those statements, that the correct place to do that would be the project committees. At this point, I've attended the pre-meetings to the referendum. I got the email. I joined the project committee. I got the email that you're referencing. I spent a half an hour reading it, and another half an hour talking to Ms. Parisian. I spent over an hour in the meeting.
Well, even Mr. Friesian agreed with me that he thought that was he was going to explore all the possibilities and thought it was a good idea.
And I gotta say, and then you're telling me that I'm not listening, and we're not listening, and we're not hearing. I gotta tell you, if you want to be 100% heard, and bring this conversation has to happen in the project committee meeting. That's where we can fully address your
Well, and I
concerns.
hope that will happen. Okay,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, and I think that you can understand my position and the neighbors who I would like to say I speak for, is that there's genuine concern. Some of these people are people that, you know, are very vocal and they're not obtuse in their ways. So what they do is you know, they stay quiet and they stay behind the scenes. And unfortunately, they get trampled on. And I'm not one of those people. But what I'd like to say is that, you know, the conceptual stuff that we talked about earlier, okay, we couldn't get any indication about light poles and heights of light poles. And then, of course, the meeting that you and Mr. Forte were at, you know, you guys were talking about 6 light poles. And then we went to the Fields meeting, and, you know, there's 8 light poles. And Mr. Forte said there were going to be 12 light poles. So, you know, you have your engineering, you know, material that's that thick, but, you know, what part of that engineering process tells you how many light poles and, you know, what the coverage is going to be and whether or not we're going to get all this afterglow and glare and so forth and so on. And these are the things that we're talking about. These are the concerns that we have. I mean, that's a lot of stuff that you guys do behind the scenes, but we're lay people, okay? We'd like to understand the process. We'd like to know that, you know, our concerns are being dealt with. And unfortunately, that didn't happen here.
Why would you say it hasn't happened? I mean, we do have a limit on speakers.
That's fine. I understand.
So, but just in closing, the commitment of the board is to work with all our neighbors, and I think we were trying to do that.
But I just want to say that process was brought along by us. I just want you to know that.
That's correct.
Yes.
So we're trying to meet with anybody who wants to meet with us. If there was a secret plan in the back room somehow, that somehow we hid from you, I'd love to see it myself. But there isn't. I can tell you, there's no secret plan. The plans that we have, totally open for you and anybody else to see and enjoy and to critique and to talk about. Our goal, and I explained this to Ms. Bochis the other day, you know, our goal is to come out of this where the residents around the high school are just as happy with how it came out as anybody else is. That's the goal. Maybe that's an unrealistic goal, because it's hard to get 2 people to get them to check again on the same,
Well, I think we will have to try harder in that respect.
We will try. We will try very hard. We will try to be as patient as we can, and we'll be as communicative as we can, and as collaborative as we can. But in the end, the only thing that's going to work out here is for the board to sit down with residents, put into one of our policies, the usage of the fields. That will be, to Mr. Swaddell's points, those will be the facts. So, for example, the Board of Education today has no intention of renting the field. I've heard fascinating stories, again, about what the Board of Ed is doing. They're absolutely astounding. And the Board of Ed has no intention of renting fields out in any. So, it wouldn't surprise me if we can all agree to put down into a policy that we won't rent it out. Or there'll be a limit to what rental we may undertake, right? We talked about having a policy on usage of the fields, days of the week, number of days, nights the hours that the lights would be in operation. That would be part of what comes out of the committee meetings that Mr. Eunice has talked about, that you are on, right? And anyone else that feels that they should have a voice there, to make it a collaborative and a constructive dialogue so we can end up in a good spot. What the light poles are on. Mr. Helb, I know, has told many people that the light bulbs are going to be 100 and some odd feet high. They're different than what our designs have.
Well,
I gotta get it out.
Go ahead.
So a lot of that is a surprise to us. I wish I was
as it is to us.
I wish I was the resident that he called with that info, but I wasn't. Somebody else was. But now we've got that, so we can work with that. Whether there's 6 light poles or 12 light, there's never been a sort of a secret board conspiracy. The designs that we have, including the layout of how the fields are going to orient on the spaces, all sort of just sketched out. That's pennies on the millions that we're talking about. The referendum work that we've done so far is to stage the work, get the estimates for the broad scale job that we have to do, get it out to bid, get it scheduled. The referendum passed and the bond secured, which we've given green light tonight for the bonds. But whether the light poles are 10 feet high or 1,000 feet high, whether they're this much wattage or that much wattage is going to make no difference to you unless they're turned on and it's dark.
Well, of course, and again, that's the concern.
So I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you, hook, line, and sinker.
And a
So
110 foot high pole is a lot more obtrusive than one that's 60.
When it's on.
Yes.
When it's off, nobody's going to care.
No.
So the only thing that's going to matter is the board's commitment in a policy on what usage we determine that the field will have. If we can remediate any part of the grass field that's up here and use that as well, that's additional space.
Yeah,
If we do it right,
valuable space.
it's valuable space. At all space, if you want to. Try to buy empty lot in Verona and build a house, you see how valuable it is, right? So any space that we can recover, we're all for recovery. But the public voted on a 280,000 square foot field. That's what we're committed to doing. How we operate the field in a way that's acceptable as much as possible to the residents around the high school is our commitment. This is recorded, you can save the videotape, I've said it, I put it into email to you guys. That's our
And I
commitment.
understand that.
We're not gonna resolve the number of candle wattage, or we're not gonna resolve the height of light poles tonight. That's the engineers
No,
working.
and I didn't expect to.
We met with Mr. Hell on the
No, I
township side
expect
to
it.
go through his concerns. We wish we knew he had concerns sooner. We would have done that sooner. Fair enough point that the community around the high school got together and said, we'd like to engage with you guys, but the minute that we did that, we said, yeah, great, let's do it. Right? It's unwieldy to have a meeting with 40 people in it, to sort of,
Well,
making
again, these are all
suggestions, so it's
they're
good
all
to have-
very concerned
it's-
people, yeah, all very
it
concerned.
should be the largest investment they've ever made. Is
Absolutely.
what is the house they're living in, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we have to have a certain degree of cautious trust on both sides in order to move forward, come up with a
We're
policy
working very hard
usage
to
that
gain
makes
that.
sense.
Yes, we're working very hard to
We're
gain
trying
that.
to engage the township rec department to be on the athletic committee so that we can co-author the scheduling of how we think it would work to satisfy the community groups that might use it during the day, as well as the board.
Well, currently, there's intention of using the field every night.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm angry that you have that intention, because I don't. I
I
don't know where that intention came from, but I've heard that a lot. I've heard that we're running the field until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Well, Mr. Forte went over that with us at the last meeting.
Okay.
And he mentioned something about Sunday to Thursday, from Thursday to
There's
Saturday.
nothing that the board, maybe, nothing that the board has discussed. I can tell you.
Okay,
nothing
but I
the board
wouldn't
has
know
discussed. I'm just telling you,
Okay.
there's nothing the board has discussed.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that.
Looking at ways to exclude the use of lights, not to include it every night of the week.
You know, those things I told you were obviously if we had an event, not just leaving them on if there's no event.
So in the end, we hear,
Mhm.
believe me, we hear, that we would love nothing better, I sent this to you guys in the email the other day, we would love nothing better than to come out of this with the residents around the high school saying, you know what, they did the right thing. That would make us thrilled.
Well, and I think it's in everybody's both interest to work towards that.
Correct, and we are. So in the end, what it's going to come down to is what's the usage of the field that shows in writing, in a policy, so that those are the facts. And we can eliminate all of this banter, all of this he said, she said, I heard from somebody in the town that this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And the right way to do that is to frame a policy, proper usage of lights, hours of operation, the days of the week, including the township rec department usage. And if we did that together and put it all down, we could look at it and say, oh my gosh, it looks like every Thursday is going to be a debacle here. We don't like it. And then we can react to that.
Well, considering that we have the other two fields that are going to be coming online
As many fields as possible.
pretty soon, I think that it would be easy to say that then we can use those lower fields just for high school sports.
Potentially that may turn out.
Yeah.
Again, unless I get the
I
rec
think that would be a
department,
very good policy.
unless we get the rec department to the table
Yeah.
and said, here's what our schedule looks like. If there's no demand to run the lights at the high school field, other than an occasional game, right? Because on the other hand, I've got the parents of 600 high school kids saying,
Everybody's in line when they get on this field.
I wish, no,
Yeah.
that's not, if you can't have a game, a high school game, as I'm sure you're
No,
aware.
not a high school game.
You can't have a high school game
No.
unless you have lights on. If you don't have lights, that game cannot start after 4:30, 4 o'clock, something like that, NJSA rules. So how many parents, and then we get to see their children play. So there will be the need to have an occasional night game.
Mhm.
But, I mean, even football, if we put every football game on at night, it's 4 games a year. Not
Well,
counting
you know,
fights,
with-
it's 4.
We grew up in the area understanding and appreciating that, and those really aren't our concerns. Okay, it's what's going to happen with the fields on the other occasions.
What are the other occasions?
Well, you know, we know that there are a lot of youth sports trying to get.
So
Again,
that's what, but that.
Yeah, so we're gonna get
That's
together
what I
on
said,
that.
that
Yeah.
the athletic committee usage is there to discuss with the township rec department at the table. We've invited Jim Cunningham
We
to the
very
table
much want to explore that.
to say, let's go through a prototypical scheduling so that we can frame a policy based on what that scheduling demands. With Mr. Felicia on the high school side as well. Put it all together. If it shows that with the use of, with the new Hilltop field and the high school field done, here's the hours of operation that you can have in both places, it'll be nice and clean and easy to see. And then I think the board will have no problem.
I think it would be a very good idea. I just want to go back to one comment you made, and then I'm going to thank you for your time. But the meeting before the last referendum that Mr. Forte held at the middle school, prior to that meeting, I went to the Board of Education and I wanted to preview, okay, whatever preliminary plans that they had. And I was told that there weren't any.
Where did you make the?
I went to the Board of Education.
You did, the Board of Education is here. Who did you say?
Yeah, one of the secretaries. And then there was somebody that they asked in the back room, and they came out and they said,
Fill out an open public records request?
no, do I have to fill it just to preview the plan before the
Yes,
meeting?
you do. You have to fill out an open
Well,
public records.
shouldn't she have told me that though?
But didn't
I
we
don't know
speak
who you
before,
talked to.
too?
No, we spoke afterward.
But Dan, I sent a dozen people the preliminary plans.
You went to their house,
Every,
inside down with someone, right?
No, I'm just saying, I mean, you said that everything was available. I made a simple request. As a resident, I just kind of walked up in there and said, I'd like to see the plan.
I'm sure you did it in good faith, and unfortunately you got the bad information in bad faith, but there is a procedure, and we're willing to share it with you. There's no secret here, there really isn't. If Mr. Spargell wants to come to your house with a plan, that's fine.
Well, I just want to indicate that that's how people make informed
But
decisions.
you have to
Yeah.
sign a form. I mean, that's the way the system works. Go to Open
Okay.
Public Records Act, you fill out a form, you tell us what you want, and you get it available.
All right, well, you need to notify the staff in the office about that policy.
Okay?
Okay, all right, thank you for your time, gentlemen. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, our next meeting will be at the tail end of April because of the break week, so we have some time in between board.
How you doing? Rob Caruso, 42 Marion. I just want to commend you guys, all of you guys on the board, for, I think, taking the right approach to this whole process after the referendum vote was counted. And 62% of the public, supported this. I think you guys are taking the right approach. You're listening to the concerns of the residents that live there, but ultimately, this project is going forward, and I appreciate that. I don't think that they should be shut out of the process. I'm glad that you guys are including them in it. But ultimately, this project has to go forward. And I'm glad to see tonight in very positive comments that you guys are intending to do that 100%. One thing that I'm curious to know is how is there a proposal to have a third field added to this project? Up on the football field, remediating the whole process that needs to be remediated, and saving the taxpayers over $1 million, as we just stated by the previous speaker. Can somebody explain to me how that's possible?
Can I, so, separate the two things out. We received an email from a resident, based on personal, professional specs that he came up with. That is separate and nothing to do with what we are working on with our project. And I think just, Mr. Spadell's point, which is, if there is money at the end of the day, we are going to do the best we can to work with that upper field, because we agreed to do that anyway, which is make it usable and remediate to some extent. At the end of the day, we have to remediate. The extent of remediation that we do is going to depend on what money is there to do that with. We've already budgeted money to remediate part of that field, not to use it necessarily, but to make it so that we are in compliance with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
Right, but the claim was that not only did you didn't have to wait until it was actually, to see if there was extra money available. The claim was that you would actually save over $1 million by doing this project.
So remember, Rob, so let's take a step back. So on the upper field, there's approximately $1.5 million of the referendum, based on the engineers that we are contracting with, definition of what it would take to remediate the field so that you can open 2/3 and keep 1/3 of the cost. right? About a million, rounded, we call it $1.5 million. There has been for about 2 months prior to the vote, so we'll call it through the early part of January, February, some board dialogue about whether or not that remediation plan was the right, that we needed to go to that extent to remediate the grass that's up, the grass fields. On the low end, it was about somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000. So in the absence of getting that resolved, we had to go with the best official engineering estimate that we had, which was about $1.5 million. What Mr. Frizzi is pointing out is he believes that the estimate that to remediate the grass field would be, there's another way to do it that would not require $1.5 million. So doing it less expensive way, satisfying whatever the state might require, would leave us about $1 million. Roughly. But it's
Or
not.
if we spend $1.5 million, we can reclaim that damage, what we otherwise would have
Right.
deemed as unusable, we can reclaim it as usable. But so there's lots of ideas out there, and today we just appointed our engineering company that has the expertise to do the work. Everything up to this point, well, I guess you did pay them some fee, but they've been doing.
They did some exploration, things like that.
So they've, I'm sure that the amount of work that they've done has exceeded whatever we've paid them so far. So they were invested in our project. But tonight we appointed them as our official consultants, and we're just going to start getting deep into the project to find out what all of our options are and what everything's going to cost. And that's really, it's going to be a 3-month process.
And also to Mr. DePalma, I asked a question when we voted on the resolution. The resolution that we passed tonight to contract French and Verona is specifically for the field, the parking lot, and the tennis portions. If you remember, I asked the question because we want to get going with engineers at the table while we have committees engaged, residents, so we're doing it all together, rather than wait until the other elements of the project are done and then get the engineers. Otherwise, we'd be having a lot of what I'll call layperson meeting time without the engineers engaged. So this contracts the engineers to get involved with the field project specifically, so we can get going on that. As the other elements, technology met, we had a second meeting today, we're not ready yet to engage that, and likewise for the building construction and HVAC and all of that, that'll be a second contract.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a question sitting there. Lisa Presby, 28 Hillside Ave. And I know it's a moot point because it's going backwards, but I'm just curious, as a resident, if I'm putting a deck on my house or a dormer or a fence in my backyard, and you have to go through town and get zoning board ordinances and setbacks and all that, is the Board of Ed subject to the same criteria?
We have to follow building code and all of that.
Yeah,
We
so-
do that. The process for us to do
Yeah,
that.
there's a difference.
Difference.
We're exempt from zoning restrictions. Building codes, we have to get permits to do construction work, just as anybody else would do, plumbing, electrical, and any other kind of
So when you
construction.
say
But
zoning, that means
zoning
setbacks, like
requirements,
from
we're not, we
people's
are exempt
property?
from zoning requirements.
We don't need to seek variances from, because there really are, there's nothing to vary in against.
Okay.
So we're committed to do what we want on our own property.
But you don't
Provided
have
it's-
like setback, like if I'm putting a fence on my property, it's gotta be whatever, 2 feet back from
Not
the
here, not here.
setback. So that's, okay. And then I would, as a resident, you have to inform all your neighbors in a 200-foot thing, space. I remember going door to door. So the board doesn't have to do any of that, it just kind of comes up. All right.
But again, to the extent that there are residents that are concerned and engaged, we welcome that. We'd much
Oh, yeah.
rather end up with folks saying,
I appreciate
you
that.
know what, this turned out not so bad, this is turning out all right, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I was just curious. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay, our next meeting, as I said, is going to be on April the 29th, confidential meeting at 7, and public meeting at 8 o'clock. Good.